Okay, here I am with Tim Flannery down at Torquay. It's a Surf Coast Energy Group talk, and you've come along. Tim Flannery, for our listeners, is one of Australia's most highly regarded environmental scientists. I've been reading up on a bit of your history. I see you went to La Trobe, as I did. Studied English and then got a change of heart. Went to Monash, did Earth Sciences. Then you did your PhD on the evolution of macropods. Quite a change.
That's right, a bit of a checkered history, but I remember those days at La Trobe very, very fondly. We had some brilliant teachers back then and a range of courses you could choose that you just can't do today. I mean, education has changed, I think. But anyway, I'm very pleased to be.
One of the people at La Trobe that inspired me was Peter Rawlinson.
I remember Peter very well, yes. And for me it was Laurie Clancy, who was just a gem of a person. Wonderful.
Okay, well, from there, your CV is quite amazing. You're a professor at University of Adelaide. You're a director of the South Australian Museum, professor for the Climate Risk Concentration of Research Excellence at Macquarie Uni, member of the Wentworth Group of Concerned Scientists, and you're now a professional fellow in the Melbourne Sustainability Society Institute at Melbourne Uni.
Yeah, that's right. I guess what's driven me through all of that is just there's a kind of real need to make a difference. I mean, I grew up in Sandringham around Port Phillip Bay 40 years ago that was a bit like what Torquay was like 20 years ago. And I saw the suburbs eat my beautiful bushland and destroy my beautiful bay. And that's driven me, I guess, ever since to try to make a difference.
Tim is also he's won numerous awards, including Australian of the Year in 2007. You're the author of several books and also a co-star in the Two Men series. One of my favourites, Two Men in a Tinny.
Great. Yeah, it was a hell of a lot of fun with John. And gee, it opened my eyes to a bit of Australia I hadn't really seen before, particularly the Darling River. It was extraordinary to go there and just meet all those people.
Anyway, we're currently seeing a bit of indicators of environmental stress. We've seen coral bleaching in the Great Barrier Reef. We've seen mangroves dying in the Gulf. We've seen kelp forests dying off Western Australia. And all of these are contributed to climate change. I was wondering whether you thought our ecosystems were resilient and adaptive, or is this just a really sad situation?
Look, ecosystems are resilient and adaptive, but they need time and space in order to adapt. And at the moment, the pace of change that humanity is forcing on them is not giving them that time to adapt. So I do think that for Northern Australia, we're at the beginning of a great biotic turnover. We will see the end of one particular ecosystem structure and the beginning of something new. And the something new, from what we can see of it from now, is going to be less diverse, as it is after every great extinction event, less stable, less productive. And we did it. We can't back away from that. But in the face of knowing that, we can't just lose hope. We have to actually make a difference, because what's at stake is far greater than what we've already lost.
I mean, there's a lot of climate deniers out there. They range from politicians to journalists, particularly some that work for one particular newspaper group. They seem to hinder the effort that we need to tackle climate change. How do we deal with these people?
Well, I've thought about that a lot. In fact, that's what I'm going to be talking about tonight here in Torquay, in large part. I think that one of the reasons we haven't done as well as we should have, and the reason why those deniers have done so well, is that we haven't cared enough for each other as Australians. We haven't looked at what's happening in those old Rust Belt communities where people are losing their jobs, where they're losing their futures, where there's high unemployment, high levels of disadvantage, high levels of drug abuse. We haven't said to those people, we're on the journey with you. We want to come along with you to make this better world. We know you're bearing the cost now, but we'll help share that cost. Yeah, we saw it I remember so well in the 90s when, well, maybe in the 80s actually, when Graham Richardson was trying to get the World Heritage Wet Tropics area settled. And places like Ravenshoe, logging towns, we'd only ever known logging. We had to bring those people along with us, and we did it with a carefully structured adjustment package for those communities to make sure they had the resources they needed so kids would get jobs in new industries. And we're not doing that at the moment with our Rust Belt areas, with our Latrobe valleys and Hunter valleys and so forth.
It's interesting, even with our politicians, that you have One Nation, for example, that are climate change deniers, and then you have someone like Greg Hunt that was perhaps supporting the coal industry and now turning around and wanting to educate these people.
It's so symptomatic. As soon as they get out of the responsible seat, they want to do the right thing. It's so typical of politicians. But we've opened the door to the Pauline Hansons. You know, you look at where a vote's coming from. It's coming from parts of Queensland where jobs are under severe threat and where we as a community haven't been able to stand up with those people and say we'll face this together. And that's what we need from our politicians and from our society as a whole. I mean, why else would you spend money but to make a better society? That's where our strength really lies, you know. So we need to somehow find a means to do that, in my view.
Yeah, very interesting. Also in this month, earlier this month, I think it was the 8th of August, we reached Overshoot Day, which is our resources. I think Australia was top of the table. We didn't do so well in the Olympics, but we won the Overshoot one, where we would need 5.4 Earths to renew the resources that we're currently using. I had a chat with Lisa Neville recently about population sustainability, which seems a very dirty word. She emphasised and talked about the need for population growth and economic growth. I mean, how do we deal with that?
Look, you've opened up the biggest, most complex question humanity faces in that question. Could I just say that I'm not as worried about population growth as some, because we can. First of all, we know how to fix it. Right? You've got to improve the kind of economic and personal situation of women in developing countries. You know, we limit our own population if we're given half a chance. So if we want to make a difference there, you know, do everything you can to help those people who are least able to help themselves to become economically sufficient and independent, you know, in their thinking. We can do that. We've done it for a lot of the world. There's still big hunks of sub-Saharan Africa and parts of Asia that haven't yet. But we can do that. And also, population growth slowing dramatically. You know, when Paul Ehrlich wrote The Population Bomb, the average number of children per woman was about 5. Today it's 2.36. Replacement level's 2.33. So it's really within reach. It'll happen over the next 5 years. Now, population will keep growing after that. But once we reach replacement level, we will start going on the downhill side. So population, I think we can manage, and we can do a better job than we have. It's the consumption that's the issue. And you look at this state of Victoria as turning into a backyard for Melbourne. I mean, it's affecting everything. It's affecting the biodiversity, and it's the fact that everyone wants to live in these enormous great houses and thinks there's some value in that, and are willing to commute, 2 hours a day to get to work. It's a broken model.
We are here in Torquay, and there's so much growth down here. In terms of using the resources, you talked about poorer countries and so on, but they rate really low on their resource requirements, whereas, we have a lower population, but we have a higher need for resources. How do we change that attitude?
Well, we have to ask ourselves where a good life really is, what value really is, and they're big philosophical questions, but I've seen enough very wealthy people in enormous houses with a great deal of misery to know that it doesn't lie in just money, I remember working in villages in New Guinea where people live in, stick huts, You see more smiles in that village than you see in Melbourne. And I think we've got to start with that really basic stuff. And we've got to be incredibly tough and brave with this, because we know the structure of society, the structure of our politicians is absolutely against this. I mean, the government, the last thing they want to see is a decline in housing. They live off stamp duty. First of all, they were addicted to gambling, now they're addicted to stamp duty, So it takes a very, very tough-minded group of people to stand up against that, but that's what we have to become.
I recently went to a wetlands restoration forum, which was up at Winton Wetlands near Benalla, and one of the main themes that they were talking about there was socio-ecological management. So it's about bringing all the people in to make decisions about the parks and the wetlands and so on, and it creates ownership for the people, whereas currently people might feel like they're secluded. It seems to me like this is a good thing, and it's the way that we need to progress.
It is absolutely a good thing. I think that we as the people need to actually take responsibility for all decisions. I've come to the view that it's actually government shouldn't be setting budgets. It's us through a jury system that should be setting budgets. So, when we ask how much should be going to defence, how much to health, etc., well-informed representative group in the form of a jury should be making those decisions. If you leave it to a minister or you leave it to one individual or a group of individuals, you're opening the door to corruption through lobbying. We can do better than that, and it's exactly the same with our national parks and so forth. We have to involve the local communities. That's where the real strength is. I can't tell you how many farmers I've met who said, I want to do the right thing, but economics is driving me away from doing it because I'm not being paid for any of the social good I'm doing or any of the environmental good I'm doing. And we have to recognise that as a community and try to work out how we actually, as a group, manage those lands in ways that are truly sustainable.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. One thing that I'd like to talk about is that you put your name to this, which is the climate emergency, and we're really interested in what's happening. Are you meeting up with these people? Is something happening further from just putting an ad in the paper?
Look, I'm working with people who are actually on the Great Barrier Reef, who make a living out of the Great Barrier Reef, trying to strengthen their hand with things. I'm due to go back up next month to do some more work with them. But I must say, one of the things I find is that my own resource base just gets stretched. I've only got so much time and so much energy to deal with that. We need a lot of Australians to come on board with this and to say, no, the current situation isn't good enough. We are going to force a change through this. And we have to somehow do that. I'm working with that group. I'm trying to, work with the Climate Council, with others, but we need more people to become involved with this.
So all these people that sign the ad, they're continuing to be active?
Absolutely. I'm sure I can't speak to you about every single one of them and how they're spending every hour of their day, but yeah, we care passionately about this. I mean, having gone up and seen the damage, I was astonished. And it's not just the reef. The reef is one ecosystem among many that's starting to change in northern Australia.
Yeah, we mentioned the mangroves and the kelp forests, even fisheries in Tasmania with the waters warming down there. I mean, all the indicators are there.
We're actively creating a new and less wonderful world through burning, coal. And one of the reasons I wanted to come down to Torquay was that you people, well, in this region anyway, managed to shut down a coal mine and a coal-fired power plant, and that was incredible. That's one of the actions that will be hailed in future as one of the great things that happened. So we just need more of it.